I think whenever I've sort of like faced that previously, I think what's really important is to sort of focus on the things that are within your control. You can't control everything. Um, I think just sort of focus on the things that are within your control, and work towards a sort of better tomorrow through sort of continuous improvement. Um, and leverage the people around you. Whether they're immediate colleagues, your leader, mentors, coaches, and it depends. Like what your goals are. If you're I don't know, if you're a small business owner, for example, and you're looking to grow your business, a newsletter following could serve as a bit of um, a database of leads. Social media. We have these people that have large followings, but that platform could just shut down tomorrow or be acquired and changed. Whereas with an email newsletter, you sort of you can download that database. That database is yours. Like you can move it to another platform. You just need to import it and then export it.
Turn this up. Turn this up.
Your professional development is one of the keys to your career success. When you combine your desire to grow with actionable steps, your journey to success becomes an incredible reality.
Hi, I'm Paul Ferranbi, and welcome to IncrediPaul Leadership, where we learn how to become the most incredible versions of ourselves by learning from each other. Today, I have the honor of having David Marsh on the show. David is a leader in tech working in the staffing industry. He has over 10 years of experience leading people around the globe. He's here today to share some key insights and perspectives on his journey. So that was just a little bit about you, David, but how about you introduce yourself the way you would do it?
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it's great to be here on the podcast. My name's David Marsh. I work, as Paul said, I work in the staffing industry for a SaaS provider. Not always been in SaaS, mainly in tech, worked across sort of software and hardware and managed service providers over the last probably 15, 20 years. Last 10 years, really sort of in people manager roles. I originally started as an individual contributor, like most people, sort of working on sort of PCs, hardware, servers, that sort of thing. And yeah, I fell into a leadership role really at a small sort of IT company where I was a lead tech engineer working with customers to install servers and networks. And I think people sort of just began to sort of gravitate to me a little bit. I sort of set sort of, standards within the team. I sort of built processes. I was sort of adopting a leadership role in a way without having the official title.
Okay.
So yeah, a bit more about me. The last sort of 2 or 3 years, I suppose 3 years now, I began sending out a leadership newsletter. Started at quite a small audience and have gradually sort of built it up to where it is today. I think the reason I started that was really I had a following. So I didn't really have the sort of tools or knowledge when I was first stepped into leadership, and I wanted a way other than sort of mentoring to sort of share that knowledge with other people. And one of my friends was sending out a productivity newsletter, and it sort of caught my eye as, oh, is this a thing? And yeah, really haven't looked back. I've been sending it out every week for the last almost 3 years now.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's a bit about me.
No, thank you for sharing that. I know the newsletter is how we got connected. We reached out just like to collaborate with each other, and then I got to learn more about your newsletter, and it is phenomenal. I think we'll get more into that as far as how you started the newsletter. But I also want to hit on what you mentioned towards the beginning, that you mentioned that you were an individual contributor and people kind of gravitated to you, even though you weren't in a leadership type role. Was that, I guess, what was the transition like for being an individual contributor to that leadership role? Was there any specific training that was given to you, or is it more so stuff that you had to do yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting how it unfolded. So I had it was a small company, so the managing director at the time was my boss. But there was
Oh, wow.
a sort of senior tech who was, he wasn't an official leader for me, but I sort of had a dotted line into him. He would be the main sort of projects sort of lead, and I rolled into him as a more junior individual. And
Mhm.
we never really saw eye to eye. I really struggled with him as a sort of senior because he never sort of, it sounds really cliche, but he didn't lead by example. Um, he would challenge me with things and sort of, he wouldn't speak positively about the work I was doing. Um,
Mhm.
and I struggled with that because I was learning a lot from him as he was sort of 5, 6 years more senior than me, been in IT a lot longer. So although I was learning a lot from him technically, the sort of softer skills side of things was not so true. Um,
Mhm.
he was just, when on reflection, he was sort of quite a negative influence, and his standards. I think it was, looking back, it was standards. I was I just naturally was thinking a little bit more sort of bigger picture, whereas he was, and I don't know if it's because he had more work on, but he was sort of a little more sort of firefighting. So where I was,
Mhm.
we resolved a ticket for a customer, and I would want to
Mhm.
know, well, how did that occur in the first place? And root cause, like how do we understand
Yeah.
why it occurred? How can we avoid that for that customer or other customers? I sort of had that kind of mindset, whereas he was of the mindset that, well, we haven't got time for that. We need to go in and fix these other 50 tickets that are coming in from other customers. So
Oh.
I really struggled with that, and I would share that feedback with my boss that, look, I think there's room for improvement here, and it
Mhm.
it tend to sort of fall on deaf ears. Um, and then at some point, that senior fell out with the boss for, there was a sort of an ego thing there, and I sort of stepped up and became a little more senior, and the team below me then sort of rolled into me. So I think I just recognized that high standards is important. You know,
Mm.
it's quite common in IT. You might have heard the phrase, "Have you tried restarting it again?" And we sort of
Yeah.
laugh about that, but we're not really like fixing problems at the core if we just reboot it or we just
Mhm.
restart it every time. Like, what's the series of events, or what are the reasons why that's occurring? And I think
Yeah.
you can take a lot of that into leadership. If someone's constantly sort of late for work every day, or are not doing what they should be doing, it's, what's the reason? Are they
Mhm.
having sort of personal struggles, or is there something going on, or do they not understand? Is it a skill versus will?
Are you looking for a place to continue to grow and develop, especially in your leadership? How about connecting with others who feel the same way? Hi, I'm Paul Ferrandi, aka IncrediPaul, and I've got great news for you. The IncrediPaul community is for people who desire to become the most incredible versions of themselves. The community is for individuals who are goal-driven and action-oriented. This community is dedicated to leadership and personal growth, especially in going deeper in your career, starting a business, or developing a business. Join me in becoming the most incredible version of yourself. Go to incredipaul.org/community to join the waitlist and sign up. INCREDI Paul.org/community. Join the waitlist. I can't wait to see you there.
Um, so yeah, I think I just, yeah, there was like an inherent set of behaviors there that I was just adopting, not through any knowledge or um, I suppose it did come down to experience, but just sort of knowing right or
Mm-hmm.
wrong. And I recognized that this senior's behavior wasn't really acceptable, and it wasn't really favoring the growth of the business or the customers. And um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I sort of disagreed with it. And yeah, I think over time, the boss kind of gave me more responsibility, as the business
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, it's only a small business. It wasn't growing aggressively, but, we were looking to, grow and adopt more products and services for our customers. And I just took more of a lead role, and then I ended up having a couple of direct reports. And yeah, it was really, it wasn't really like structured. We didn't really have like KPIs, which seems to me really bizarre
Oh,
now
wow.
looking back.
Yeah.
But there wasn't. like a customer experience score, or like, oh, you need to close X number of support tickets a day. It was very loose. But I think one thing we did focus on was sort of hiring the right people, and I think that was really important.
Okay.
So yeah, I sort of adopted a role as sort of technical manager, where I had some people management responsibility, and the rest of my role was helping out with projects and sort of onboard, like a bit of pre-sales as well. So, you know, like any small company, you wear multiple hats.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my first sort of gig, and I did that for a few years. And I thought I knew a lot, but I didn't.
Yeah. Well, I want to unpack some of that because I know you mentioned the skill versus will and really understanding what is going on, and you mentioned root cause. So I have a lot of experience with continuous improvement. So you're speaking my language, talking about root cause and getting to what needs to be solved. And I really like how you tied that to leadership, because it's really easy. Like you mentioned, he was just fighting fires. Like, this is happening, I'm going to try and fix this. It's happening. But until we really understand the underlying reasons behind something, we're not gonna know why it's happening. Like you mentioned, just turn it off and on, restarting it. Yeah, it might work, but we don't know what's causing it. Like, so I think it's really important that you highlighted that. So I know you mentioned that you moved into kind of like a technical manager role, and a lot of the stuff you were doing was kind of learned from your experiences. I know you kind of mentioned one experience here with the manager that you had initially not really wanting to get to root cause or trying to solve problems the way they should be solved. Were there other experiences when you got into this role, or any training or mentorship that you got that helped you develop your leadership?
I am so in that company, I think I realized after, you know, the sort of 3 years I had in that manager role, that it it was stagnant. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
growing. I
Mm-hmm.
was, although I had buy-in from the owner at some points, it wasn't a lot. Um, yeah, you know, it was little things like there was lack of boundaries with customers.
Mm-hmm.
For, you know, we'd
Oh, really?
we'd sell them
How
support for
so?
10. We'd tell, for example, we'd sell you know, a support package for 10 computers, and then
Mm-hmm.
2 months later they would have 15 computers, but we wouldn't change our price. We just still support all 15 for the price of 10. And it was
Oh,
just little
wow.
things like that, yeah, that just didn't make any sense to me. And I was like, you've got to have boundaries. Like, there's got, you know, you can give
Mm-hmm.
the customer the benefit of the doubt, but there's got to be a point where you've got to be mindful of the business growth. You know, the business has outgoings, and we can't just keep absorbing stuff for free. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it was little things like that. Um, I was I was really passionate about our service offerings, and I also wanted us to continue growing. And broadband at the time, we could wholesale it and sell it, and I was quite keen on doing that as well. And we just didn't really have like a proper sales team, and you know, we
Mm-hmm.
did marketing, but we didn't really have a sales team. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it just got to a point where I just felt I don't feel like I'm growing here. I need something else. So I started looking for another role. I joined another IT company about twice the size, and at the time I was very excited because it was giving me all the stuff that my previous company didn't, where there was structure, there was departments, there was salespeople, there was 3 or 4 salespeople, which was great. And
Mm-hmm.
I was having lots of like pre-sales calls with customers about buying servers and networks. And yeah, I felt excited again. I had a team of 8 or 9 and an operations manager. I was doing one-to-ones each month. I had 3
Wow.
KPIs. Like, there was just more structure,
Yes.
and that excited me. Plus, the CEO was like just an entrepreneur. Like, he had multiple businesses. This IT company was his core, but he'd been successful in the past. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I joined. I was there, yeah, about 2 years. Similar sort of managed outsourced services to IT companies, and yeah, I learned a lot. again, coming into that business, I thought I knew a lot, but I didn't. I learned a lot more. But I still didn't learn my lesson. So by the end, so during that time there, I think that's really where I started to study leadership more.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I started listening to podcasts. I started reading books. I
Okay.
started
Okay.
studying more. I was just more. I think it came from a place of imposter syndrome in a way. I think I felt
Mm.
that I'm struggling or I feel uncomfortable, and my solve there was to read more books or sharpen
Mm-hmm.
my skills with theory. So when
Yeah.
those practical instances came up, I'm like, well, I know how to do this. So I know how to speak intelligently for it.
Yeah.
So that went well. A similar cycle. um, we were selling very well to existing customer base, but we weren't again growing the business. We weren't. Our salespeople were not out there bringing in new business. They were just selling to existing customers. And similar story. I just felt like the company wasn't growing quickly
Mm.
enough. I'd sort of like, I feel like the team were performing well. We'd identified a lot of deflection opportunities and improved our processes within the team, but it just didn't really feel like the business was growing. And similar story, but I didn't wait as long this time. I started looking for another role.
Okay. You
Um,
learned from the last time.
yeah. So a recruiter approached me and said, "Oh, hey, I have this software manager role," and I was like, "Oh, I don't like the sound of that," because my background is sort of IT and hardware. But
Okay.
I sort of gave it. I took a look, and yeah, it worked out very successfully.
Mm.
I think one thing that, again, I'm so glad I didn't. But after about 2 or 3 weeks for my new role, I was like, "Oh, I need to go back. I don't like it here." That
Oh
I was
wow.
really struggling with, like big sort of discomfort. I didn't enjoy it. It was corporate, like a lot larger. The company was a lot larger. I was I wasn't the smartest in the room anymore. Um, so I was really struggling with that. I had a team of technical people that knew a lot more than me technically, even though I knew how to lead. I didn't know anything about the product they were supporting. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, it was a tough time that first month or so. I really wanted to go back to my comfort zone, but I'm so glad I didn't, because I quickly realized that I really didn't know a lot about leadership. I thought I did, but I didn't again. Um,
Mm.
yeah, it was an interesting experience. That first year was a steep learning curve, but I'm glad I stuck with it and didn't sort of go back to that place of comfort, because I think we all say it, but that's the only place you're going to grow is when you're being stretched and you're in that place of discomfort.
Yeah, that is so true that you only grow when you're being stretched. But what people don't also say is that it doesn't feel good in the moment to be stretched, to feel uncomfortable. It's easy. It's one of those things to say that it's really easy. It rolls off the tongue. Like, yo, you only grow when you're stretched. You only grow when you're uncomfortable. But when you're in the moment, you're like, I don't like this. So that's something that people need to realize, that you may not like it, but just sticking through it, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
being disciplined is very important. And so I do
So
want
true.
to learn a little bit more about like some resources that you got into for your leadership. But I feel like we've kept the audience in suspense for a little bit as far as where you're from, because I'm in the United States. I know they heard your accent, so they already know you're not in the United States. Can you talk a little bit about where you're from, um, like where you grew up, like where you've traveled? Like, I know you mentioned you've done some stuff globally as well.
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, I'm originally I grew up in London in the UK, and then I
Hmm.
moved to Brighton. It's a sort of seaside town about an hour from London, sort of south,
Okay.
for uni. When I was about So interesting story actually. So I moved to uni when I was 18. Um,
Mm.
I was at uni for a couple of years. During my third year, I did a placement year at high school, um,
Mm.
learning about networks and IT, nothing
Mhm.
leadership related, but just learning my craft. And I really enjoyed it. Like really enjoyed it. There was another opportunity at the University to do a similar job, which I was really keen for because the salary was a lot higher, the compensation.
Yeah.
And they just never opened it. So in the end, I accepted this role at this high school, and I was a little bit
Wow.
disappointed at the time. But I suppose what I want to highlight to your audience here is that sort of that move to the high school was actually hugely beneficial to me in a way, because my friend got the role at the Brighton University, and his learning experience was completely different from mine. So at the high school, I was basically let loose. So we had a network manager there, and he just exposed us to everything. So
Wow.
we got to build servers, we got to roll out new machines. We deployed like 200 computers to a new IT suite. We just got a ton of exposure, and we learned so much during that year. And not even computers, like we learned about phone systems, about point to point, like fiber links. Like we just learned so much. It was incredible experience.
Wow.
And in contrast with my my friend who was at this university, they basically just let him create accounts and reset passwords. So
wow.
yeah, so it was. I think they obviously need to be a bit more, I don't know, careful or mindful of the students and protecting data and things like that. But yeah, it was just one of those things where I'm so grateful that I just went with the opportunity at the high school, because it really sort of gave me a path forward at uni. So after the placement year, I was done with uni. Like I just didn't enjoy it. I was like, I love computers. I love working with networks. So I actually traveled to Hong Kong that summer because my family lived there, or some of my family. And when I was out there, I just decided there and then, right, I'm going to try and get a job for September when I get back, or I'm going back to uni. And it just turned out, the role I mentioned earlier came up as like it was like a junior kind of engineer role. I took it, came back, and yeah, that's kind of where I started my sort of IT career. And I told university, look, I want to defer for a year, and I never went back, so I ended up with a diploma. But yeah, I don't regret sort of going to uni, because I met a lot of friends there, and I got the placement year. I think that was the extremely valuable year for me in terms of like growth. So yeah, that's kind of, and I'm still in Brighton. I don't sort of plan to move. I love it down here by the coast. Yes, it's pretty relaxed. It's definitely a more chilled way of life, should we say? London's quite sort of hustle and bustle.
Okay, yeah. It's a large city, lots of people.
Yeah,
Everyone's busy. I definitely understand that. But yeah, thanks for walking us through that. And I like what you highlighted, and something that we stress on here is those experiences that we didn't expect or maybe didn't even want oftentimes shape us into what we want to be or need to be.
yeah,
And it sounds like it was the same in your case, that you got to do a lot more than just resetting accounts and passwords, and just get to let loose, understand the IT side, the hardware side, which is truly incredible.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Sometimes things just sort of happen for a reason, or I think when you try and be too intentional about something, you know, you put so much energy into something, it doesn't work out, and you feel a bit, um, you feel like, oh, why is that sort of not happened? And I think sometimes you can be guilty of trying too hard, when sometimes taking a step back and seeing the good in other things, and new exposures, new experience and exposure is really important for, like anything, forming new relationships, learning new things. Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah. Exposure is huge. And I know you're doing a lot of that with your newsletter. that you didn't mention the number earlier, but I'm going to mention it, at least as the time of this recording. Over 6,000 people subscribe to your newsletter. That is an extraordinary number. And I know you mentioned you've been doing it for over 2 years, maybe 3 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So kind of talk me through why a newsletter and how did you even start a newsletter? Because when I think of IT professional and people in hardware, I don't think of someone that's also going to be starting a
Mm-hmm.
newsletter as well. So kind of talk me through how all that happened.
Yeah. So I think it started, or one of my friends had um, a newsletter at the time, and I just thought it was quite a cool concept that you could, have a bit of a following or like a community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
leadership is about, like, community, like
Yes.
supporting one another. And
Are you wondering what's next? Has everything you tried failed? Or maybe you just feel stuck? Then coaching might be right for you. The coaching relationship is a relationship totally centered on you. If you're tired of running on the hamster wheel of life and want to start to see results, reach out to IncrediPaul for help. So what are you waiting for? Go to IncrediPaul.org/coaching, IncrediPaul.org/coaching, or at I am IncrediPaul on all my socials. Or you can click the link in the bio for your free coaching session. I want to make sure you become the most incredible version of yourself.
yeah, I think I'd seen them and thought, oh yeah, I want to inspire others. I want to sort of share my wisdom and ideas with others. I want to share some of these. There's so many valuable resources out there, and I don't think they get the exposure they deserve. And I thought, how about like curating rather, a list of resources that can be used, you know, for others within a newsletter. Pulling in some experience from my day to day, throwing some quotes. Just share some inspiration and wisdom. And it started really small, where I didn't quite have a standing start. What I did was I did like a webinar. I built this like slide deck for like a management training. It's really basic, like slide deck. I'm not a trainer, and I do think, looking back, it was a bit too many words on the slide deck, a bit too much of me talking, not enough like interaction engagement. But I got some good surveys after. But I basically pulled, I think about 10 people attended. They were like my first 10 subscribers. And then from there, I just continued to grow it. I was quite intentional with growth. I'd post stuff on LinkedIn, add a link at the bottom. I'll talk to about sort of friends and family. If I'm in like a leadership group and someone asks a question, I said, oh hey, like I wrote this article, go and check it out. I suppose just being a bit intentional about growing it, and it's sort of grown and grown over the years. And it's tough. Like some weeks, and you probably know yourself, like sending it out every week can be a struggle. I know I've listened to one of your podcasts recently where you talked about prepping podcasts months in advance. Like I definitely need to take a leaf out of your book there, where sometimes it feels like I'm up late trying to get it out the door before like it's due the next morning type thing. I think being a bit more, I feel like I plan it up to like 70% of it, but then that extra 30% can take me a lot longer while I'm fine tuning it, like tweaking it.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I think just to help others, to inspire others, to help them, give them resources that they can use to improve themselves as an individual and as a people leader.
That's really incredible that you're doing that, and it's a lot of great content that you have on there. And yeah, I know you mentioned like when you're putting stuff out every week, it can get to be a lot. Like definitely when I was starting, I was only doing, at least for the podcast, I was only doing stuff once a month, because I'm just the type of person that if I'm up to the deadline, I just get super stressed. So I need so much time. So that's really the only reason. And then And then recently, even though the podcast is weekly now, there's just so many people I've been able to connect with and talk with, so that I have a lot of episodes in the bank. But I think I really love what you're doing with the leadership newsletter, because I think there are a lot of different avenues to get leadership resources, but I like how like you mentioned, that you curated, you have a specific topic that you're focused on. You share some insights from what you've experienced. You have different quotes on there, different resources. I think I saw some stuff about AI tools as well on there. So I think it's really cutting edge.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about leadership. I know you shared about your journey. Why are you so passionate about leadership?
It's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to me because I don't see. I think I've experienced sort of bad leadership, um, and or organisations that don't do it well, and then organisations that do it really well. And I think leadership's important because it's something that we can all do. You don't need to be in a leadership role to be a leader. I think there's behaviours in there that we can all exhibit. Um, and I think, like anything with strong leadership, you create healthy environments. You build a better um, you build a better future for everyone. Um, I think good leadership is about sort of being humble um, and not level sensitive as well. Um, but yeah, I think it's just I don't know. I love helping people. I think it's important that we're all growing, learning new things, and yeah, I think I think this sounds silly, but I think it's quite simple as well. Like, but hard, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like
Yeah. I
it's
understand that.
it. I don't think it's a complex thing, and you can pick it up quite easily just by being a good person, by doing the right thing, by setting high
Mhm.
standards. So it's easy but hard. And I think it's yeah. I really enjoy it, and I think it's that continuous improvement you touched on earlier. It's how do we make things better, for the team, for the customers, for the business, um, and yeah, that's something I get really excited about and enjoy doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I can definitely sense that. And I like what you brought it back to, that leadership is not only a position. And then John Maxwell, I think he says it best, that leadership is influence. So whether you have an influence with a coworker, with your employee, even with a friend, it could be a son, daughter, father, mother, whoever it is, that's what
Mm-hmm.
leadership is. And so it's really easy to get caught up in a leadership position or having a title, but that's really the first level of leadership. You can have the title, but the people might not want to actually follow
Mm-hmm.
you. So
Yeah.
building that relationship, and I think you kind of hinted on it too, the values, like who you are as a person, that I know John Maxwell says this too, is that you can teach people something, but you're going to reproduce who you are. So if you are
Mm-hmm.
trying to teach something that you're not actually doing, like I told you, you're talking about your manager, like he was not someone that you want to follow as a leader just from the way he was doing things. And so when you have people who have those qualities, who have that vision, who are trying to move forward, you if they have a leader that's not doing that, it's almost impossible to lead them, because they kind of put a lid on themselves as leaders, because they're not willing to do the continuous improvement, to continue to develop, to be
Mm-hmm.
humble, show humility. Because I know servant leadership is a huge thing that people are talking about, but I really don't think there's any true leadership without it being servant leadership, because you have to meet people where they are so they can take them where they need to go.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But that's really powerful. I know you mentioned that you started a newsletter because your friend had a newsletter. Was their newsletter anything related to leadership, or what? Was it just a spark to your idea?
Yeah, it just sparked my idea really. Not so much like the topics they were sort of writing about, but more just around the potential growth. Um, yeah, it just sort of excited me about sort of sharing that wisdom and knowledge. Like we can do it on social media, of course, but I've always had a view that social media, they sort of, your kind of your audience is somewhat locked in. I mean, they control it in a way, whereas I feel like a newsletter, you have sort of more freedom, or you sort of own the audience. Um, and I know, I know there's a lot of people, there's junk email, and it feels like other people absorbing content via other means, but I think email's still important. I think people still read emails. They're obviously they're more mindful about what's going into their inbox. So I think that's a good indicator as well, that you need to be sending out sort of good content. Otherwise, they're going to hit that sort of
Mhm.
unsubscribe link if it's not serving them
Yeah.
or adding value to their journey anymore. So yeah, I yeah, it's just something that's kept going, and I think it's a bit like a habit where you look up at the board and you see, right, I don't know, the last 30 days are ticked. I can't stop this streak. I need to keep going, and yeah, like sort of, I think some weeks it is tough. Other weeks, if you plan ahead, it's a lot easier. I think when I send a newsletter out on a Thursday, which I created maybe like 2 weeks before, that feels really good. It's almost like I feel like my ducks are in a row. I feel organized.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
it's of higher quality as well. And I think that's very
Mm.
true for leadership as well. Is if you're going into meetings and you're well prepared, you've planned ahead, you know what questions you want to ask.
Mm.
It's usually a much more productive meeting. Whereas if you feel like you're doing everything at the last minute, I don't think you're thinking in the right headspace. You're not planning. You're not being proactive. You're being reactive in a way, and stuff gets missed. Um, whereas with the newsletter, if I organize it and have it in line 2 weeks before, maybe some things I think about. Oh, I should add that in because it's similar. Or I think the final product you send out is of higher quality. And I think it's like the what's it called, the Eisenhower matrix, where I think real leaders focusing on the important work is extremely important. Um, there's always going to be things that are on fire, those urgent, critical items, and then there's the important items, but they're not on fire, they're not urgent right now. But if we don't sort of take care of them, in a month's time, they will be. So I think going on a bit of a tangent here, but I suppose the message is, if we can focus a little bit more on preventative, being proactive, planning, thinking more strategically, we'll save ourselves a lot of time or pain, our team, our customers, by sort of being ahead of the game. um, and yeah, every time I send that newsletter out at the last minute, or I've been a little disorganized that week, like it doesn't feel like it's a 10 out of 10. It feels like it's
Mm.
an 8 or a 9, because although it might be good, or it might have what it needs to have, it just doesn't feel like a well organized one. It feels like,
Okay.
I'm a bit behind the 8 ball on that one.
Okay. No, I definitely understand that. And I like the parallels that you're drawing between the newsletter and leadership. It's not something I thought about, that really being organized, being proactive, and really understanding what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. That goes hand in hand with leadership, like having a vision. Like if you have a leader that doesn't have a vision, that is scary because if they don't know where they're going, then how are you going to know where you're going, what you're trying to do? And even what you mentioned with your newsletter, just having the topic and really taking the time to curate it, put it together, and really be intentional with it is really
Mhm.
true. It's really good.
Yeah.
So I'm relatively new to the newsletter game. I've done blogs in the past. I have the podcast. A lot of stuff I've, at least with my newsletter currently, is incorporating stuff from my podcast in there. I'm sure there's people listening that have thought about doing a newsletter, but maybe they do stuff on social media. And I wanted to talk about this because it's just this whole idea versus rented versus owned space. And I think people are starting to realize that more. What would you tell someone that's thinking of doing a newsletter, but they feel that they're doing stuff on social media? What would you tell them? Should they go about doing it?
I think both platforms serve a purpose. If you look at social media, has a huge reach. It can, I mean, I think LinkedIn is untapped by a number of people. Like the reach on LinkedIn is extremely huge. So I think the way I see it is, and it depends, like, what your goals are. If you're, I don't know, if you're a small business owner, for example, and you're looking to grow your business, a newsletter following could serve as a bit of a, a database of leads. By you can send out content that aligns with, their interests, and they may later convert to customers. They may not, but whether they convert to customers or they don't, you're still building your brand in that field or niche. So you can sort of use a newsletter for that sort of purpose, and then you could use social media to extend your reach. If you've got 100 subscribers on your newsletter, for example, and you want to increase your reach, you might post something on LinkedIn, and some of your existing followers may like or subscribe, and that extends to their network and so on. So I think the reach is tremendous by sort of leveraging sort of social media. And yeah, I still like the idea of having more control over it. I think with social media, we have these people that have large followings, but that platform could just shut down tomorrow or be acquired and changed. Whereas with an email newsletter, you sort of you can download that database. That database is yours. Like, you can move it to another platform. I mean, you just need to import it and then export it. So I think you have more control and sort of autonomy with the data. And yeah, I think you need to sort of make a commitment as well. Like, I think where newsletters grow is sort of with that consistency. Like people like the consistency, like whether you decide to send it every Monday or Tuesday. I think making sure you send it at the same time every week without fail is really how you sort of grow, because your audience is almost expecting it. They're like, oh, okay, where's my Tuesday's dose of wisdom? So yeah, I think it can serve multiple purposes. I think where I've seen sort of value with it is where people want to grow a community of like-minded people for whatever their reasons, whether it's to grow their business or they just want to learn from others that have similar interests. Whether that's leaders or people that are into gaming, obviously like AI and cryptocurrency, that sort of thing as well. So yeah, I think they serve multiple purposes. But yeah, I like the fact that it's kind of your data, and you get to decide which platform you use to leverage that data.
So that's good. It sounds like both of them, they complement each other from what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That's good to know.
But yeah, I like podcasting. I know that you're very fond of that, and you're doing a great job here. It's something I've sort of thought about in the past. But I think you can be, and maybe this is a bit of a parallels again. I think it's very easy when you're trying something new, like a newsletter, to stumble across other things that relate to it, and you think, oh, I need that, I need that, I need that, I need that. Before you know it, you're sort of taking, one step in 30 directions rather than sort of like, good progress in one direction. So I've definitely been guilty of that in the past, where, I've spun up a newsletter, I'm sending it out. I've sent it out for two months, and it's not really growing, and then I think, oh, it must be the platform, and I've got this shiny platform over here that looks better. It's got different functionality. I should try that one. So then I'll pick up my subscribers and move them over there, and obviously the results don't change because ultimately they do the same thing. So I think, yeah, that's just one thing to be careful of. Just stick with it for sort of 6 months and see how you get on, and fine tune it, rather than thinking, right, my newsletter's going out now. Now I need to do YouTube, or now I need to do that, or now I need to do podcasting. It can quickly become a bit overwhelming.
Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with the overwhelming part. Definitely last year was, and it was intentional but also unintentional, that I just wanted to try as many different things as possible,
Yeah.
see what I like, what I didn't like, because I launched YouTube last year with the podcast. I launched video podcasts. I had an audio podcast. I started an audio newsletter, or I started a newsletter to the end of the year, and I started doing a podcast twice a week. And then towards the end of the year reflection, I'm like, this is too much. Like, all this stuff is great, but I also work full time as well. Like, this is not realistic to do. It's getting stressful. So for me, I think what I'm going to be focused on this year is really between doing more stuff on YouTube and the newsletter, and trying to continue to merge those two together. Because a lot of stuff on the newsletter does have is more highlights from the podcast, and then include some other stuff as well, so that it's not a lot of additional work. It's more complementary.
Good stuff. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. But we're almost out of time. It went really fast, but I want to make sure, is there anything about you or what you're doing or just leadership in general that you want to talk about before we close things out?
Yeah, I don't know if it's you'd call it sort of like parting words, but I suppose, like, similar to what I touched on earlier, I think leadership, like, sometimes it can be a bit of a lonely place, especially if you're sort of like, you're a leader running a team. It's like anything. If your team are doing a good job, they're going to sort of know about it. We should make sure they're being called out for the great work. And if the team are not doing a good job, obviously that comes to you, and you need to sort of fix that. And that can be a bit of a lonely place, especially when it's one setback after another. I think whenever I've sort of like faced that previously, I think what's really important is to sort of focus on the things that are within your control. You can't control everything. I think just sort of focus on the things that are within your control, and work towards a sort of better tomorrow through sort of continuous improvement, and leverage the people around you, whether they're immediate colleagues, your leader, mentors, coaches. Leadership, although you may be the leader of the team, it's still a team game, right? Like, you're not going to be successful on your own. If you look at business leaders are not successful on their own. They have accountants, they have HR managers, directors, they have support people. Like, it's a team effort. Ultimately they're making the big calls and they're accountable, but I think that's important, that leadership, it is a team game, and you're not expected to know all the answers. You need to lean on your resources and support around you, and ultimately that will help you be successful sort of more of the time.
That's good. Leadership is a team game, leaning on the resources. But David, it's been incredible having you on the show, sharing your experiences of where I know you shared that you're from the UK, and then remind me what city you're in, right? You said Brighton?
Brighton, yeah.
Yeah, Brighton. There on the coast, a little bit more laid back. And then your experiences from where you were at a school to working for small businesses, progressively getting into more leadership experiences. And I think I definitely relate to your story. I think there's others who will hear this as well to relate to it, as far as having leaders that don't model leadership very well, and how you wanted to do better and really took it on yourself, even when you weren't in a leadership role, to develop and learn and grow. And that led to you getting promoted, to you being in a position of leadership. And then even understanding, I know you said a couple of times that you thought you knew everything about leadership. You learned that you didn't know everything. I know I've been there, still get there at times. Is that I think it's a positive for people who are not good at leadership right now to understand that that doesn't mean that you have to stay there. You can always continue to learn. And for those that are good at it, I think it's a caution as well that just because you're good at it now doesn't mean that you should stop developing. We talk about continuously improving because there's really no such thing as coasting when it comes to leadership. When you're coasting backwards if you just try to coast. You need to continue to learn and grow, put people first, and that's really the only way you can be incredible. But I want to make sure that people know how to stay connected with you. I'm going to make sure I link it in the show notes as well, your newsletter, your website, whatever you want to share, how people can connect with you.
Good stuff, Paul. Well, yeah, it's been wonderful to chat to you and be on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. But can you share how people can get connected with you as well?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so yeah, David Marsh, and my newsletter is houseofleadership.beehive.com, and yeah, as Paul said, he'll drop it in the notes as well. So yeah, if anyone wants to take a look or subscribe, yeah, happy to hear from you.
Absolutely. And I would say for those of you listening or watching, if you're on YouTube, definitely if you care about leadership, you want to developing your leadership, you absolutely need to subscribe to this newsletter. Maybe you don't feel like you read a lot. It's not that long, but it has a lot of great content every week. I think every Thursday. So definitely subscribe to it. I'll have the link in there if you're listening. If you're watching, you already saw it come across the screen. But thank you, David, again for being on the show, sharing your valuable insights, just sharing your story. It is truly incredible. For everyone listening, I hope you learned something from his story, that where you are is not where you have to be. Continuously improve in your leadership and in life so you can be incredible.
Be sure to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'll see you here next time. And be incredible.